Here comes a child bride. The dangers of child marriage and its ties to poverty and inequality. At the tender age of 14 in Cameroon, while most children were fretting over homework and final exams, Habiba was preparing for a wedding she did not want. After her father died, her mother sold her to a stranger to gain income. However, what followed when she arrived at her husband's house was months of abuse, the death of her newborn, and eventual abandonment. Years later, she knows what drove her mother to make such a flawed decision. There was no more money, and she preferred that I get married. Habiba is only one out of 650 million girls and women alive today who were married before the age of 18, often without their consent. The decision to marry these girls off at such a young age is primarily driven by poverty and gender inequality, and it leads to a lifetime of health, economic, and social problems for the girls involved. According to UNICEF, if the current trends continue, the number of girls and women married off as children will increase to almost 1 billion in 2030. Thus, it is critical that we understand and address the issue, as it harms the well-being of the children we are responsible for protecting. Relation to poverty and inequality. Child marriage and poverty are intertwined cyclically. Child marriage is both a cause and a consequence of poverty. Girls from the bottom 20% of families are twice as likely to marry under the age of 18 as their upper 20% counterparts. This is because in many cultures, women and girls are viewed as financial burdens rather than as possible wage earners. Thus, many families view child marriage as a ticket out of poverty. They receive a sizable sum of money from the suitor, and they also have one less person to provide for in the household. Additionally, in cultures where the bride's family is required to pay a dowry, an early marriage can result in a lower bride price, allowing the family to cut costs. Nevertheless, most cases of child marriage happen due to tragic choice. The philosopher Martha Nussbaum describes tragic choice as a situation in which two or more central capabilities are in competition. According to UNICEF's Child Protection Officer in Niger, families are using child marriage as an alternative, as a survival strategy against food insecurity. Poor families in Niger may struggle to choose between their children's bodily health capability and control over one's environment capability. As a result, in a misguided attempt at ensuring their daughter has access to food, they may marry her off to a richer, older man who will steal her autonomy. Refugee mothers face another tragic choice as they struggle between protecting their daughters from sexual assault and protecting their agency in education. Of her decision to marry her 15-year-old daughter off instead of allowing her to continue schooling, a Syrian mother said, "It was much better for her to get married, even though she was still a child, than to be raped by a soldier." These mothers, who have suddenly been thrust into the head of the household role, believe that their daughters will be safe from sexual abuse if they marry young. Poor families in precarious situations like these are forced to choose between protecting their daughters' lives and marrying them off, or respecting their autonomy by choosing not to. This shows how poverty is a driving force for child marriage. Child marriage also leads to poverty. Girls who marry before 18 are approximately 50% more likely to drop out of high school and 4 times less likely to graduate from college. Similarly, dropping out of high school and getting married as a teenager are associated with higher poverty rates down the line. Research indicates that a woman in the United States who marries before she turns 18 is 31% more likely to experience poverty later in life. This is because female victims hold jobs less frequently and are less productive due to their forced role as mothers and homemakers. Thus, in seeking to help their children escape their own poverty, the parents of child brides have unwittingly doomed them to begin another cycle of generational poverty. Moreover, child marriage has roots in gender inequality, as girls are disproportionately affected. Around the world, the prevalence of child marriage among boys is 1/6 of that of girls. This is because of stereotypes surrounding gender roles and the perceived lesser value of the girl child, making girls the first to be married off when a family is trying to escape poverty. Child marriage further deepens this inequality by limiting educational opportunities for girls and exposing them to domestic violence, creating a cycle where the girl child is not given sufficient opportunities to succeed. By addressing child marriage, our society also addresses the issue of gender inequality, the causes and results from it. Ethical framework. From many ethical standpoints, one of the reasons why it is crucial to address child marriage is that it is not morally permissible, and it hurts the well-being of children, the most vulnerable members of society. In numerous ways, Nussbaum's capabilities approach for assessing quality of life is a good framework for understanding the harms of child marriage. Nussbaum developed a list of 10 central capabilities that humans need to live in a dignified manner. Child marriage violates at least 7 of them. Life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination, and thought, emotions, play, and control over one's environment. It does this by leading to an increased risk of death and sexual abuse, which violates life, bodily integrity, and bodily health. Obstructing access to their education, which violates senses, imagination, and thought, and control over one's environment. And limiting their socialization with other children their own age, which violates play and emotions. These violations hinder the victims from living a dignified life. Typically, different communities have different practices and disagree over the ethics of those practices. Hence, using his veil of ignorance, political philosopher John Rawls attempts to imagine the principles of justice we would adopt without knowing whether we would be among the most powerful or most vulnerable in society. In other words, he forces us to ask what principles of justice we would implement if we were in the place of the child bride. As such, Rawls outlined the principle of fair equality of opportunity as a principle of justice. This principle states that jobs should be open to all, and everyone should have a fair chance of securing them. However, child marriage violates this by putting its victims at an unequal footing in the job market, as their lack of education deprives them of the skills necessary to succeed in most careers. Florence, a 14-year-old girl who narrowly escaped child marriage, speaks of her future plans. "I want to go to high school and then become a tradeswoman." If she had gone through with the marriage, Florence would not have been able to have these dreams of entering the labor market, because her husband would have ensured that all her time was filled with homemaking and childcare. Similarly, child marriage violates the Maximin rule, which Rawls believes is a solution to social justice issues. The Maximin rule tells us to make decisions that ensure the worst off in society are as well off as possible. However, child marriage breaks this rule, as child brides are currently significantly worse off than they would be in a counterfactual world, where they were not married off so young. Mary, a girl from rural Zambia who was married off at 14, hints at this when she says, "If I were in school now, my life would have been different. I may have been employed as a teacher." This demonstrates child marriage's role in worsening the quality of life of the girls who are already vulnerable members of society. Moreover, when passing moral judgment, there are 3 important interests humans possess: well-being, autonomy, and justice. For each of them, we all have both positive and negative rights and duties. In the case of child marriage, the victims have a positive right to sufficient internal capabilities and external conversion factors that promote autonomy, and we have the positive duty to empower them to reclaim their autonomy. Similarly, we have a negative duty not to increase the inequality that the child brides experience, and a positive duty to promote equality. Hence, all of these ethical frameworks point to the fact that it is imperative to understand and address child marriage for us to restore the victim's dignity that has been taken away from them. Misconceptions. Widely held misconceptions about child marriage are often brought up by proponents in favor of it, and by people who would prefer to downplay it in comparison to other issues. One of these is the belief that child marriage is exclusively a problem in developing countries. However, this is untrue, as child marriage is prevalent in the United States as well. Almost 300,000 minors were legally married in the United States from the years 2000 to 2018, when states began to pass laws banning it. As of now, 16 states have passed bans to end child marriage, but many other states have exceptions with judicial or parental consent, or have minimum marrying ages of less than 18. Many people in the United States who are in favor of child marriage often cite concerns about parental rights. Missouri State Senator Mike Moon defended child marriage on the basis that parents should be allowed to decide what is best for their children. However, there are many cases where parents' wishes are overridden if they conflict with the child's best interests. For example, parents are authorized to make medical decisions on behalf of their children, but this authority can be challenged. Medical caretakers have a legal and ethical duty to advocate for the child's best interests when parental decisions could be potentially dangerous. Similarly, our society and government have a duty to protect children from child marriages arranged by their parents, due to the wealth of existing knowledge that proves how detrimental child marriage is to the child's well-being. Possible solutions. One solution to the issue of child marriage is increased education in the communities where it is prevalent. The decision to marry girls off is often due to a low perceived value of education and a lack of employment opportunities for girls. Thus, their families believe that marriage is a more profitable venture than education. However, by improving the quality and accessibility of education in low-income communities, young girls will be better equipped with the skills necessary to acquire good jobs. Then, their families can begin to view them as wage earners rather than economic burdens. Additionally, sustained efforts should be made to ensure that married girls can continue their education. And above all, there should be educational outreach programs targeted at the girls' families to make them understand the dangers of child marriage and the value of education. Another possible solution is the criminalization of child marriage. In 2016, Gambia enacted an anti-child marriage law that punished the suitor and the parents with 20 years in prison and bystanders with 10 years. However, advocates question whether the threat of prison would be the most effective. Thus, this solution must be implemented in conjunction with the first one to change the community's attitude towards child marriage. This will ensure that this solution is effective and does not end up driving the practice underground instead. Additionally, influential figures, such as religious leaders, should be used to sway attitudes away from child marriage. Evidently, since poverty is a major driving force for child marriage, economic development is one of the most promising solutions to it. This can be done through programs that financially support low-income families, such as conditional cash transfers or CCTs, that are contingent on girls staying enrolled in school and unmarried until they turn 18. CCTs have been implemented in countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Kenya, and have led to a decrease in child marriage rates. This is because they improve the household's economic security, while also incentivizing families to keep their female children in school and unmarried. However, CCTs can only be properly implemented in combination with education, so that young girls are equipped with the career skills necessary to financially provide for themselves and their families even after the CCTs end. Conclusion. Child marriage is an issue intertwined with poverty and inequality. When many victims are asked what they want for their children, they say, "I want my children to be able to decide who they want to marry and when." Hence, we must understand and address this issue so we can give the victims the dignity and autonomy they deserve. Thank you for listening.